Welcome back, everybody, to Fight Scene Film School. We're going to take a little departure from film, going to the stage. Fight choreography for stage combat. I'm going to show you how I go about breaking down a theater script. But if you're only here for film stuff, this is still going to be really interesting, as long as you're here for choreography stuff. If you're here because you want to see a lightsaber duel, then this isn't going to be the video for you. Go somewhere else. This script is Good Night, Desdemona, Good Morning, Juliet. It's a Canadian play that I did a few years back. This is a little floor plan, but this isn't the stage floor plan. This is the room we were in. We were in a weird spot. We were at the top floor of a yacht club, which ended up being fantastic because there was a bar right downstairs and you were allowed to have drinks in the theater area. So basically, I showed up, did my fight call where I run everybody through everything so it's fresh in their minds before the show starts, and then grab a drink and sit and watch the play for free. It was fun. Some details will seem very trivial and come into play big time. Yes, I've got a list of the actors and who they're playing, but this is important because you can't have, let's say, Rob here plays Othello, Tybalt, Professor Claude Knight, and Juliet's nurse. We can't have Rob all out of breath from a fight scene as Tybalt, exit, and then have to come back on as Tybalt and be composed and relaxed. So as a choreographer, you have to keep track of who's playing whom so that you make sure they're not out of breath when they shouldn't be. This actor, for example, Ben, he would exit and have to go around the back of the stage, crawl underneath the stage to a secret trap door, and come up under a desk as the chorus. And he barely had time to take off his costume. He some nights only made it halfway through changing his costume. So from the waist down, he was wearing a dress, but from the waist up, he was in the right costume for the chorus character. So you need to keep in mind as well, when you're doing fight choreography, where is the actor going right afterwards? Which you don't have to consider in film at all, because in film they cut and it might be hours or the next day when something happens. And a little note here, when getting the swords, try to get a leather belt with a sheathing loop. Yes, because we had fencing foils. We were just using these practice swords. These are just dowels with some tape and some lines from the play to kind of motivate the actors. So now that you know that, the first thing you're going to do with your script is go through every exit and every entrance. We're not going to do that here, but you have to go through every single one and every scene change to make sure an actor isn't exiting as one character and coming right back on as a different character. And you have to keep in mind how out of breath they're going to be and who they're playing next. And also, if somebody is exiting, you can't choreograph them to exit on this side if they have to immediately enter as a different character on this side. So let's say Tybalt exits and then it's a scene change. Lights go out, lights come back on. He comes on as Othello from this side. You have to calculate how much time there is and if there's enough time for that actor to exit here and quietly get all the way around to the other entrance. You can't have stomp, 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 and everybody hearing that. Stage directions obviously are going to be a big thing that you're looking for, but you have to read the whole script and we're going to find out why. I mean, obviously there are reasons why, but there are surprise reasons that we'll get to in just a second. Show starts out and there's a smothering with a pillow. So I had to choreograph how to realistically have the actor put pressure down on the pillow without actually blocking the actor's breathing. Stuff that you don't usually think about as being a big deal is a big deal. Not everybody knows how to fake smother somebody with a pillow, and it was a little throw pillow. So I had to teach an actor how to fake smother somebody with a pillow while having a little spot out the side where the actor could comfortably breathe with room for mistakes. Because what if an actor is really nervous and they make a mistake? You can't have the one being smothered just tap out. We do have that as a thing, we say, tap or, give a little pinch if they're doing it too hard. But you can't just restart it and keep doing it until you get it the right way. You have to get it right every single night. There needed to be a realistic amount of pressure held on the person's face while the person had a comfortable area to breathe through, while not obviously just turning their face away from the audience or away from the pillow, because the audience will see that. Juliet kills herself with a rapier, which is a weird thing. Right away, I had to mention to the director, rapier is a really big thing, really long to try and kill yourself with. Is she going to have her arms way out here trying to stab herself with a rapier. It's not going to work, so we ended up using a dagger. It's a weird part of the script, but you have to look for stuff to the playwright. Obviously, makes sense. Oh, there are rapiers in the show. She kills herself, she stabs herself, she will use a rapier. But from a choreographer's side, that is ridiculous and not going to work. It's better to just address it right off the bat, rather than waiting until there's a rehearsal with the actors and they try to use a rapier and suddenly they're like, wait, this is a bit too long. This is where reading the script comes in really handy. The main character is Constance. Constance at one point has this monologue. She's talking about Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare sets the stage, blah, 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 blah. And she talks about when Tybalt slays Mercutio. She says that line. When I read this play, I realized that they never really say explicitly if all of this stuff is a dream. Constance kind of wakes up at the end and isn't sure if everything was a dream or if it really happened. I need to know that as a choreographer, and I needed to talk to the actress playing Constance, because when Tybalt slays Mercutio, if she mimed that and it turned out that the whole thing was a dream, then the way she mimed it had to match the way the choreography was during the Tybalt versus Mercutio fight later in the play. So it was because of reading through the script really carefully a couple of times, thinking what I would do as the actor during this monologue. I personally probably would have mimed it. So then you have to meet with the director to find out if it is being done as a dream. The director has to make a decision about that, even if the audience doesn't know and the audience is left to make that decision on their own. The director knows and the actor knows. So I have to find out what they've decided. And if it is a dream, I have to match that with my choreography. If it's not a dream, I have to make sure, if she mimes that the choreography is distinctly different. Because if it accidentally or coincidentally ends up being the same as what she's miming, then we are saying that it's a dream. Then I'm affecting the script with my choreography without the intention of doing that. So I need to make sure, if I'm supposed to be affecting the script, that I do, but I also need to make sure that I don't do it accidentally. And here I've got this note, see the golden pen. So that was just like a piece of evidence at the end of the play for me to say, so this happens, and does that mean it's not a dream and it really did happen? In this instance, it ended up not being a dream, so I didn't have to match that. But also the actress just plain didn't mime it. She decided it wasn't something she wanted to do. So it was a non-issue. It could have been the single biggest clue to the audience as to whether or not it was a dream. Moving right along, Mercutio, put thy rapier up, come sir your passato, they fight, hold Tybalt, good Mercutio, and then Mercutio gets stabbed. All right, so Tybalt, under Mercutio's arm, thrust Mercutio in. Yeah, I have to choreograph that. Big deal. But this, the important part, Tybalt leaves. And then he comes right back in. Mercutio exits and dies. Enter Tybalt. And on the next page is the Tybalt versus Romeo spot. So there were a lot of fights, which was fantastic. But I can't have Mercutio leave out of an exit and Tybalt enter through that same exit, because even once they're off stage, if one leaves and the enemy comes on the exact same spot, the audience is going to think, oh, well, that was nice that they walked past each other and didn't care anymore. I guess they're friends now. So had to keep in mind, Tybalt comes back, Rob comes back on, and he needs to not be out of breath from the first fight. And he needs to not have his arms tired out or his legs tired out, depending on what I put into the first fight. Yeah, the guy playing Romeo, he's fresh, he's good. The guy playing Tybalt, if he just had a workout, essentially, I need to factor that in. I can make the first fight huge and amazing, and then maybe that's the reason Romeo is able to beat him, because in the script it doesn't really make sense in Romeo and Juliet that Romeo can beat Tybalt all of a sudden. But maybe Tybalt is tired because the first fight was too taxing, and that's why Romeo is able to get the better of him. All these things you need to figure out by usually talking to the director in this case, who was the director for this show, was fantastic when it came to fight scenes and understanding like the physicality and the amount of practice and rehearsal time that has to go into it. Another thing we had to consider is Tybalt's got a sword, Romeo's got a sword, and Mercutio has a sword. Tybalt stabs Mercutio. Do we leave the sword in Mercutio's body and have him exit with a sword stuck in him? If we do, Tybalt now doesn't have a sword. when he exits and goes backstage, he can come back on with one. But if Mercutio keeps that sword in, then we need maybe Mercutio to drop his sword so that Tybalt can pick it up and still have one. Because when Tybalt fights Romeo, we need him to have a sword. So you've got to keep track of how each weapon gets on stage and how it leaves the stage. And when you do something like have a weapon stick into somebody and have them like, oh, you need to make sure you don't have a fight scene where all of a sudden somebody doesn't have a sword. Here's a spot. Othello ignores the pillow and proceeds to bind and threaten Iago. So we've got Othello who doesn't have handcuffs, but the script suddenly just says he binds him. With what? I had this idea for a knot that was handcuffs, and I wanted to use part of Othello's costume, whether it was like a rope belt or a sash. We ended up going with a sash that I think was around his waist, and had him tie him up very quickly, which meant a lot of choreography, getting Ben's hands through the knot the right way without having him like accidentally catch it with a thumb or a finger. So we would have him like hands, thumbs tucked, and then it would get bound, and we would have him make a fist to make it look like he was more tightly bound rather than just like he's bound and then like it looks like it's inconsequential and it doesn't bother him. When he binds Iago, though, we can't have the whole play just stop while he does like this big complicated knot or figures out how to tie him up, and everybody's just kind of standing there because the audience gets bored and the audience knows it's awkward and just starts looking around and giggling. It's a comedy show, but that's not the joke there. So you don't want them laughing. So you have to come up with a knot that's fast, if it's even a knot. You have to find out, how are we binding him? What are we using? Can I bring on a prop? Can I bring on handcuffs? Can I use part of his costume? Can we do something quickly? Or does he just grab him and put him in like a Kimura or something like that? Do we just use like a little bit of jujitsu or something? Or, I don't know, throws him to the ground and stands on him while talking like all triumphant. So then, of course, I make my own notes. Rob and Ben talking about the cuff knot, talk to the director about it and about what costume there could be, and then talk to the costume designer about it. One of the reasons that it's so important to break down the script right away is so that you've got time to go to the director and say, hey, I've got this idea for like a knot using part of his costume. The director can say, yes, let's do it. So then I can go to the costume designer and say, all right, we're doing this and this. We need part of the costume to be able to do that. What can we do? And you need the costume designers to have the time necessary to make alterations or to change their design before they even make something, so that they're not wasting their time making a costume and then they have to do something different to accommodate your choreography. But most importantly, the sooner you break this stuff down and get those ideas out there, the more likely they are to be implemented, because the easier it is to implement every one of those things. If a costume's already designed, if a costume's already made, if it's already been fitted to the actor, those are now all hurdles to your idea as a choreographer that you have to overcome. And it makes it that much more likely that you're going to get a no instead of a, that's an awesome idea. You don't want, that's a great idea, but we can't do it. Constance at one point hands a sword back to Iago and goes, here's your sword back. She's supposed to be naive about sword fighting and very uncoordinated. I thought it would be funny if she just like pointed it right at his face, like, here's your sword back. That's what we ended up doing. We ended up doing it like, remember in my Jackie Chan versus Benny the Jet Urquidez fight scene video where I talk about how Benny threw a punch and this is Jackie's head. He threw it here and then moved it over instead of trying to punch right here so that it was much safer. We did that kind of thing with the sword. So instead of pointing it right at his face, she did it a bit like this and then could move it over. So it was like, here's your sword back. But, and it would be really close. To the audience, it looked really close. But from the point of view, if you are the actor, it looked more like this.
Here's your sword back. And everything. Have fun. Here's your sword back. And everything. Okay, so that still works.
So the actress playing Constance has to faint here in the script. And yeah, obviously you need a safe way to fall, right? But I knew she did yoga, so just needed to meet with her, ask if there was some sort of like yoga way of getting down to the floor and back up that we could change into fainting. That was something she already knew, because if she already knew something really similar, that's less time we have to spend learning something new. That's more time we can spend making other stuff better. Desdemona holding her sword at Iago's throat. Oh, yes, I remember this. Okay, so this happens a lot, and you really need to keep track of what props are being used and little details that you don't think of when you first read the script will come up in rehearsal, and you'll have to rework your choreography. So we had Constance fainted, so I had Desdemona pick up Constance's sword. Now she's got two swords, and we had her cross them at Iago's throat. So Iago had the swords here, right? And then what were her lines? Show me the ocular proof. Constance has been accused of something by Iago, and Desdemona is like, all right, prove it to me. Iago takes out this piece of paper and says, look, this is my proof, and hands it to Desdemona. But now Desdemona has a sword in each hand, and we've got this weird, how does she have a sword in both hands at Iago's neck and then like grab the piece of paper because she's supposed to take it? So we ended up changing it to, instead of Iago handing it to her, he reaches into his costume. We're going to use Web of Spider-Man here. And he pulls it out and he holds it like so. And it also was creased like this way, so it was folded into 4 sections. And we had a little slice in the paper in the middle. So what she could do was Ben would hold it tight enough and the creases would guide the sword. And we had her put the sword gently against the paper and then thrust it. And it would go through the hole, and it would look like she stabbed a hole into the paper, and she would bring it to herself with the sword, with one of the swords. But we had Ben hold it far enough away from him, like, here you go. You're probably cringing at the comic book treatment here. He would hold it far enough from his body that it wouldn't be a threat when the rapier went through. We have a repeat of this section in the script where it's Tybalt, Mercutio, and Romeo all doing that whole Mercutio gets stabbed under the arm scene. And this time, the actress playing Constance is supposed to come in and sort of tackle them or make them all get apart from each other, and she's supposed to end up on the ground. So that means we've got 3 swords in play. We've got Romeo's that is, if I want, sheathed, or maybe he's got it pulled out to stop them. But we've got Tybalt and Mercutio sword fighting, and Romeo in there with a sword, at least on his belt. And then we have another actress coming in to all 3 of those and having to safely weave her way through all those swords, push them all apart, and fall without getting hit by any of the swords. I was playing with this idea of her like shoving them and grabbing the arm or the sleeve of one of them and ending up on her back in spider guard, and then maybe doing like a triangle, but the triangle ended up seeming too sexual, and it wasn't supposed to be a sexual moment yet. It became one later on because the girl playing Constance, Romeo, mistakes her for a boy, but is still very attracted to him, and we had to go in a different direction. Here's another fun spot. We had Helena was playing a page. She's also the one who was playing Desdemona, and Jen, who is playing Constance, has to pounce on him and pin him down. But Helena's character was handing out invitations to the party happening at Juliet's place. It's the party that Romeo and Mercutio go to, where Romeo meets Juliet. And she's got a bag full of scrolls and is handing them out as invitations to people. And so I thought, what kind of bag is it? Maybe instead of just like jumping and pouncing on Helena and pinning her down, we could do something cool with the bag. Is it a handbag? Is it a paperboy kind of bag? Can I use the bag in the choreography? I wanted to do something far more creative, and I got to. We got to pick a specific kind of bag and do some cool stuff with that. And this is all stuff that usually doesn't say, this is a fight scene. There's so much more opportunity for choreography that isn't just the fight scenes in a script. So go through it and don't just think, where's the fight scene? Okay, now I'm gonna look at that. No, everything. Look for every possibility to make the production better with your choreography. I don't mean any excuse to insert choreography, any way to get yourself more work. I mean, anything you see that you think, I can make this better. I can make this a wow moment for the audience. That's when you like take your notes like this, and what kind of bag? What can I do with it? Can we do this? And what's in the bag? What do the scrolls look like? Can we use the scrolls? Which we did. There were a lot of fights in this show, but there were just as many, if not more, moments that weren't fights that I was able to do stuff with that was maybe even more fun because it wasn't expected to be a choreographed moment. Something on stage you got to keep in mind is they got to do this every night. So they have to be able to get the choreography right. You can't have somebody just throw something and catch it, because if they drop it, they have to be able to do it every single night. But also this spot here, Romeo punches Tybalt in the arm. If they're punching each other hard in the arm and they are doing that 5 nights a week, and then on a 6th day they're doing 2 shows, they're going to have sore arms. That's going to affect their ability to do the sword fights. It's going to affect their ability to do other stuff in the show. So Constance says in the script that her fine motor skills aren't very good. So she's clumsy. She's supposed to be. But then this part of the script, Tybalt tosses her a sword and she catches it. So what, she's no longer clumsy? So I had to put a star beside that and ask the director, like, what's going on? Is this just sort of like not the most consistent writing with this script? The scripts aren't perfect. There can be mistakes in them. What is it? Why is she able to catch it? And we ended up taking it out and not having that sort of thing. In fact, we had it being on the floor and she went to pick it up and kicked it and had trouble even just picking it up off the floor. And it got a great laugh from the audience. But we stayed consistent with her being clumsy and not having great motor skills, which you have to choreograph. You don't want somebody to be not skilled, but wild and unpredictable. You need them to be predictable for the other actors so that it's safe. If you're writing a play, never, ever write that somebody throws a sword and another person catches it. It's really difficult to do. It's not a movie. And in the movies, it's done in like multiple different shots. There's a shot of somebody throwing it, and it's a separate shot when somebody catches it. It's not, oh man. Don't write weapons being thrown on stage. Don't do it. Throwing weapons on stage is a bad idea. You're gonna have a bad time. So I did write, just in case the director really ended up wanting to stick with the catching it thing. She was scared of swords earlier in the show, so I thought, well, maybe it'd be badass if she was wearing like a leather glove or something like that and the sword was tossed to her and she caught it by the blade. Like, that's how far her characters come, where she's not only not afraid to catch a sword or use a sword, she will catch it by the most dangerous spot. Then it says here, Constance yelps with fear and fends him off clumsily. So she... Consistency, people. Even if you're a playwright, be consistent when it comes to choreography. This is a moment where... So the catching it, that's the playwright having in their mind, just like a director in a movie, it'd be cool if we did this. And the playwright is breaking character for the sake of something they had in their mind that would look cool. Don't break character with choreography just because you think something's going to look cool. The choreography has to consistently match the character. You cannot break that. In this part, Romeo is supposed to come in just like between Tybalt and Mercutio. Romeo comes in and tries to stop the fight, but he's wearing a dress for reasons that make sense in the play. So the script says Tybalt goes to stab and it gets caught in the dress. And we figured out a way to do it where Tybalt went under the dress and lifted it up with the sword so that he could kind of sneak a peek. And then there ended up being like a running gag of Tybalt and Romeo kind of like falling in lust with each other, but always with the mistake that Tybalt thought Romeo was a woman. And I've got a note here where you don't usually get the completed costume until much closer to the production, but we've got to be able to rehearse that if we're going to do something with the dress like that, like going underneath, or even doing it like the script says. So had to talk to the costume designer and figure out what it was going to look like, the fabric it was going to be made of, so I knew if it was going to be heavy enough that it would bend the blade of the sword, because we didn't actually use rapiers, we used fencing foils. Those bend a lot, right? So we had to figure out those details so that we could get sort of a practice dress, one we could wear throughout all the early rehearsals as well while we worked on this. This is a simple part, but sometimes you have actors who consistently show up drunk, in which case you've got to choreograph around somebody who's maybe not the most... Juliet picks up the sword, puts it in Constance's hand, rips open her top, and puts the sword against her. And it's like, Juliet just in the script is obsessed with dying for the sake of love. So every chance she gets, she's like, yes, and I love you, and you should kill me. So I had to be able to choreograph her putting the sword in somebody's hand without having the blade wave around near somebody's face, right? Seems simple enough. But what if it happens to be an actor who shows up drunk now and then? You've got to have choreography that they can do sober, of course, but also that they can still do if they're tipsy and being unprofessional. So getting to know what the actors are like factors in. Sometimes you have to change your choreography according to odd things that can come up that shouldn't come up, but they do. So I had a complex choreography that they both did and ended up having to shift all the complexity onto the actor who was sober. And in doing that, there's only so much choreography you can expect an actor to learn. So I had to strip away some of the complexity, obviously, but I mean, there was only so much I could put onto Jen to do because she also had all these fights and all these other choreographed moments throughout the play that if I took this 50-50 thing of Juliet and Constance and made it like 90 for Constance and 10% done by Juliet, all that extra stuff to memorize is just too much to ask. I had to strip away a lot of the complexity, but the complexity that there was and anything that involved potential for somebody to get hurt, all of that stuff had to be what one actor was responsible for, and the other had as little responsibility, almost like, I hate to use this analogy, but like one person's leading the dance, and the one who's sober is leading the dance in this case, and the one who may or may not be sober that night, that one is just being led. So they're taken care of even if they're tipsy, and hopefully nothing is going to go wrong. You can't guarantee nothing will go wrong, but you can minimize the chances. And that's what I had to do with this. Constance wrests the sword from Juliet and tosses it over the balcony. And I was like, oh, maybe like around the back of the neck and then under the arm, and like this complex thing. And then maybe like an armbar to a hip throw here in a way that, still makes sense in the world of the play. But all that had to be taken out. This part, Julia hits Desdemona with the pillow, but Desdemona disarms her easily and knocks her flying. You don't usually, in traditional martial arts, think of how to disarm somebody who's got a pillow. There's fun stuff. When it comes to choreography, you get to be like, this is why I don't care about gun disarms too much, because this is the stuff that comes up more in my experience. Like, yeah, disarm a gun, ooh, yay. What if it's a pillow? What can we do that's even cooler and more fun with a pillow? Pillow up, there was a smothering, and then there's a pillow disarm. This whole page had to be choreographed, not a pillow fight of like, he, but like a complex exchange of this person getting a pillow and that person getting it and being disarmed and being swapped and being smothered and then being rescued from a smother, and all of this happening with these lines. So it was each choreographed movement had to be the amount of time it took to say a line or the amount of time that the actor was going to take with that line, because you never wanted somebody to be doing something like, I'm doing this with the pillow and now I have to wait until you get to the next part. Okay, now I do this with it. And sometimes that involved giving them things to do, like if you get there too early, this is what you're going to do. to kind of kill time without looking like you're killing time. Sometimes a pillow would get dropped and you'd have to like have, all right, if this mistake happens, this is our path that we take to get back on track. And if this mistake happens, this is what we have to do. If the dagger's not there because somebody accidentally took it off stage, this is what we're going to do. So you have to match the choreography and the time it takes to execute it with each of the lines so that they stay with the beats of the dialogue, so that the beats of the choreography stay synced up with the beats of the dialogue. You can't just make up for it in editing. If they match the beats at the beginning, but slowly one goes faster than the other, you can't just edit it to make it look like they're matching. They have to really match. It's like one long take of a fight scene or a pillow fight, whatever. It's one long, everything is one long take. Everything has to really work from beginning to end. And when it has to match up like this, it has to match up beat by beat from beginning to end with no ability to compensate for choreography mistakes in post-production. You have to have tighter choreography that will work every time. Here's the line. I'm working on it, sir, but my fine motor skills are really poor. That line early on in the play had to inform all of the choreography that I did for this one character. So you have to read the script carefully because the smallest little line, my fine motor skills are really poor, but also maybe the character's lying. Is it like a character who doesn't believe in themselves? So you have to ask the director and the actor, how are you playing it? How does the director want this going down? Is it that she really does have poor motor skills? So this little half of a line means got to meet with the actress, got to meet with the director, got to discuss. Is it real? Is that what it's really like? Okay, now this is going to inform everything I choreograph. There we go. Theater fights. Respect stage combat. It has way more going on than you think.